So during the most intense parts of kratom withdrawal, one of the only things that really brought any kind of real relief and comfort would be taking hot showers. And I'm lucky to have a really nice shower head that dumps a shitload of water on you. When I went to a detox one time, and the shower that I had there was just like a tiny little trickle that came out, and that really did not help very much. But if you have a decent shower, that can definitely bring a huge amount of relief. And then I would say once the hardest couple days or the hardest few days are over and you're starting to feel a little bit better, one thing that I found really helpful to kind of bounce yourself back into a more regular state of mind and state of being is to play with the cold shower part of it. So what I found is I tend to get into the shower with a hot or warm shower, and the kind of like the technique or the objective for these showers is different than the typical cold exposure. um if you know about Wim Hof or any of these cold exposure enthusiasts, where they're doing it for the dopamine or the fat burning or the brown fat cells, all that kind of stuff. Um, that objective, I tend to hear they like to stay in the cold longer, and a lot of the time they want to trigger the shiver response, and they'll either do only cold shower or cold plunge, or if they're doing alternating warm and hot, then they'll always end on a cold shower. And so what I was doing was a little bit different. I was not interested in um, dropping my core body temperature and triggering brown fat cells and burning fat and all that stuff. All I really wanted to do was to kind of shock my sensory system a little bit, but not too intensely, and cause a trigger for that adrenaline and norepinephrine and dopamine for short periods of time, um, and then come back to the comfort of the warm water. So I would start the shower on a hot shower, and then once my body temperature was quite warm and I was feeling nice and relaxed, I would slowly shift it towards the cold little by little, and spend 20 seconds or whatever at each gradient, climatizing to that temperature. And then if I was feeling up to it, I would go into the really cold temperatures just for a short time to kind of shock the system a little bit, but then go right back into the warm to calm the system down. And so going back and forth maybe 2 or 3 or 4 times during my shower, moving into the extremely cold and then back to the warm, it I feel like it kind of starts to like remind your brain and body what it's like to go into a brief panic mode and then come out of that panic mode and go back into the panic and shock mode and then come out of it and be comforted by the warmth again. And yeah, then I would always end it on a warm temperature, but keep my head cold. So I do one final cold shower where I get my head really cold and my brain really cold, and then I would switch it back to warm up the body, but keep the head cold, and then that's when I would end the shower. And for me, I found that seems to have the best results for helping the nervous system kind of kick back into re-regulating itself, after being all out of whack and trying to rebalance itself with the absence of kratom. Couple other brief things that I'll mention. During the worst couple days of withdrawal, I would say caffeine, like coffee, nicotine of any kind. I chew a little bit of Nicorette gum, but I found caffeine, nicotine, and weed would very easily make the withdrawals worse. So I would stick to extremely tiny doses of that stuff. And then after the worst days are done, then just one small coffee in the morning really helped to wake me up. And it seems like the coffee is so much stronger now that I don't have the kratom in my system as well, and so naturally my caffeine intake has been lower. And as well as I have some microdose capsules of psilocybin mushrooms, which again is a very fine line for me, where a extremely small dose can be very beneficial, but even a tiny bit too much can be too much to handle. And so again, for those worst days, I didn't really take any microdose, but once those initial couple days were through and it was just kind of battling through those lingering symptoms, I found a tiny bit of psilocybin microdose mushrooms was helpful. And yeah, so I know that that's using caffeine, nicotine, cannabis, magic mushrooms, all these things are drugs, and they're chemicals, and they're coming into the body, and they're triggering dopamine, and they're triggering different neurons to fire in different ways. And ultimately, I think it would be better to have those substances minimized as well. But ultimately, they're absolutely nothing like kratom, specifically in the way that I use them, because if I have a tiny bit too much nicotine or a tiny bit too much cannabis, I'm completely turned off of it. It creates a terrible experience, and I naturally don't want it, for a couple days or whatever. And I don't rely on it for anything really. It's more of just a little spice on top of things. Whereas kratom was very much like an obsessive compulsive addiction. Anyway, that's it for now.